It's not quite often that we have a Beatle in town, and this gentleman that we're going to introduce is truly a living legend. You know, besides Stu Sutcliffe and John Paul, George, and Ringo, there's only one other guy can truly say he's a Beatle. And I've known this gentleman for a bunch of years, one of the kindest, sweetest guys you'd ever want to meet. His recent album, well, a few years back, 2008, was such a brilliant record called Hayman's Green. I brought my copy, and I'm sure it's out there somewhere. You'll be able to find it. It truly is a fantastic record, very autobiographical, and Pete's going to join us now, and you guys can participate with some questions. We got about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. If it goes great, we might go a little longer. But please welcome, direct from Liverpool, the man. This guy is so great. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pete Best. Let's hear it from him. Pete and I go back a bunch of years. He's been on my radio show. I should make a mention.
Hello.
Breakfast with the Beatles on Sunday mornings on WZLX. Pete was on my little TV show many years ago, and he's called in throughout the years. And Pete, good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You get over the jet lag yet?
No. No.
Well, you know, I have some notes, and let's start from the very beginning. And if you have a question throughout, you can certainly raise your hand and walk up to the mic, and we'll recognize you, and Pete will answer your question. But
Don't you dare.
yes,
Don't you dare.
don't raise your hands quite yet. Give me a moment or two to get this thing going. The woman who was responsible for it all, a brilliant woman. I thought she was way ahead of her time. And I don't know if Pete even realized that years and years later that people would still remember his mom, Mona Best. Mona started it all, obviously, and she had the foresight, the little bit of luck to buy Hayman's Green. Now in Liverpool, Pete, they name houses, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what the name of your home was, Hayman's Green. And tell us about your mom from your earliest recollections.
Oh, God. How long have we got? Right.
She was a great lady.
Yeah, she was. She's the unsung hero of, I suppose you could turn around and say Mersey Beat. She's the one that, her foresight basically put Liverpool on the map. You know, she provided a club, the Casbah, which was, she just wanted to bring music to the kids of Liverpool. And that's what it was about. And because of that, you know, the music industry grew. It became so vast. You know, the Casbah became so vast. From having a band on, which was the Quarrymen, which was the early foundation of the Beatles, which started way back in August 1959. Starting at one night a week, it ended up by the time she actually brought it to fruition. There was music getting played there, live bands 7 nights a week. And that wasn't, you know, every top band in Liverpool played there. But the thing with Mona was that she wanted to bring on young musicians, you know. And so for bands who didn't have the pedigree, she gave them the opportunity. And there's lots of bands which started at the Casbah, went on to become famous, and all down to Mona. She was the, as I turn around and say, she was the unsung hero, and I have great pleasure talking about her. I'm proud to be her son, and I always will be, you know.
And that's why we started the conversation with Mona Best. She was a visionary, and when she first said, Pete, I'm going to open a little coffee club, music place downstairs, what did you say? Did you think it was a great idea? Did you say, oh my God, I'll never get any sleep? They'll be thumping all night and the music and...
What did I think? I said, get on with it. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. You know, but and it was great because we were privileged to actually be parts of it. We built it. You know, it was a family-run thing. And as you've said so many times in the past, Tachi, you know, it was a club which grew. It was a family membership. And that charisma that Mona had spread to the fans. And that was the incredible thing about it. Like, you know, she was an agony aunt, you know, for most of the kids in Liverpool. And it was wonderful to be part of it.
Well, let's talk about the first time you met Paul McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison, and then fast forward a little bit to when they came down and helped you paint the Casbah. First time you met the boys.
First time I met them? Most probably 2 weeks before the club opened. The club opened August 29th, I think, 1959. Long time ago. And the band which should have opened it, which was the Les Stewart Quartet, which George Harrison was a member of, and a very dear friend of mine, Ken Brown. And it broke up a couple of weeks beforehand. They were supposed to be the headline act. And George came down and he basically turned around and said, Mo, got bad news, the band has actually broken up. And she turned around and said, okay, you know, what are we going to do? They were in a predicament. And he turned around and said, I happen to know a couple of guys who aren't doing anything at the present moment in time. And they might be interested in taking the gig over. Okay? So it was very much a case of, she turned around and said, bring them down. She brought them down, and lo and behold, they turned out to be John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Okay? And that was, I knew George from before, playing in the Les Stewart Quartet, but I actually got to know them.
And who were you closest with out of the three? And then there was Stu Sutcliffe, of course.
Of course, Stu. I mean, Stu wasn't part of the band at that time, but, you know, I got to know him through the Casbah again because he went to our college with John and Cynthia, and he made his presence felt. You know, he was there. And it was funny because, just tell a little story. One particular night in the Casbah, this was before Stu was playing bass with the band. And he just won the John Moore's exhibition. He won £50, which was an incredible amount of money at that time. And I remember it well. We'd been performing, and the club had wound down, and we were, sitting there. And there was John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Stu in the middle, right? And they knew that he'd won £50. And they wanted a bass player. And they knew that if they could persuade Stu to part with some of the money and buy a bass, then he'd be in the band. And they did it that particular night. You know, they turned around and said, Stu was turning around and said, I can't play bass. And John and Paul turned around and said, I'll teach you, right? You got to be in the band. So as history portrays now, Stu went out and bought the Hofner bass. John and Paul taught him to play bass, and he became a Beatle. And it all happened in the Casbah.
Unbelievable. And they helped you. I know that Paul and John and Cynthia helped you paint the Casbah, and it's still in that state, the original state today.
Lots of things. I mean, anyone been to the Casbah? Just a matter of interest.
There you go. Look at that.
Okay. So I can't tell lies then, can I? No, okay. You've been there, you've seen it. Okay, you've seen the Aztec ceiling, seen the rainbow ceiling, seen the spider's web, seen the stars on the ceiling, seen John Lennon, and it still stands.
Still stands today. It's one of the most popular tourist locations. Yes, sir, you have a question. Please step up to the mic. What's your name?
Jim.
Jim, what's your question?
Question is, sir, how big is the Casbah? I can't envision. Compared to this room, is it like the length of this room or smaller?
It's split up into different little places, but most probably overall it's the size of this room.
Okay, just wondering. Thanks.
But you go through it, and you just the Aztec room, then the middle chamber, then the band room, then the alleyway, then the Casbah, then the coffee bar. Okay, that's them. They've been there. They know it.
Fantastic. Okay, so you end up going to Hamburg with the band.
Unfortunately, yeah.
What were those days like? A lot of pills to stay up all night. I mean, you guys played for hours. It wasn't a 45-minute set by any means, right?
No, we played 6-7 hours a night, 6-7 days a week. That was it. But it was a learning curve for all of us. I mean, which was absolutely incredible. We didn't realize it at the time. But the long hours we played turned us from being this mediocre band which went out to Germany, turned us into this prolific rock and roll band which went on to conquer the world.
And you guys would be performing, and the audience probably didn't understand the language, right? You were singing in English and they were German,
Yeah.
but it didn't matter.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing was with music and, the German audiences at that time, live music that most probably heard, rock and roll anyway, was on the jukebox, so there were very few bands out there, which were actually playing live. But they knew the words, they'd heard it on the jukebox. And even though they couldn't converse in English, as we sang, they sang along with us.
And they probably didn't know what the words meant.
We taught them. We taught them.
And I recall reading that there would be fights in the audience, and you guys might still just play on while there were fights going on. Is that true?
Yeah. Initially, it was like, oh my God, there's a fight going on. We've never been part of this. Liverpool lads. And but after a while, most probably after the second week, there became second nature. Though there's a fight going on, fine, just keep playing. They'll sort themselves out, and away they go.
And what was the story about George Harrison throwing up, and it sat there for weeks, and you named it? Is that true?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I knew that. God, I haven't talked about that for ages.
Yeah. See, I remember that stuff. We try to dig up the nuggets that people don't know about. But
okay. Let's see if we can dig this one out the vaults.
We can pass on any question we ask today, Pete. Whatever you want is fine.
We're prone to drink a little bit in Hamburg. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we did. Strangely enough, we had nothing else to do. But this particular night, George had a skinful along with the rest of us, and we were staying in a flat just over the road from the Star Club. And I got to about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were all fast asleep or dozing. And next minute we just heard, okay. George threw up, okay, right by the side of the bed. And he didn't do anything, he just turned back again. And we were all looking at it, okay, and it was like, it was still there when we woke up in the morning. And it was still there the next day. And it was still there the day after. Right? Because Mutty came in, that was the cleaner, and she basically turned around and said, who the hell puked up and made that mess? So George turned around and said, it was me. Right? Very proud of the fact, okay. But by this time, this pile of puke had started to congeal.
I'm beginning to be sorry that I asked the question. I apologize because it's early for some of us.
Everyone had the dinner. So. But because a long story short, it stayed there for a while, okay, and it started to smell, it started to reek, it started to congeal, get green. All the boys that were in the bands still came, and it was like, look at George's trophy. Right? And George is quite proud of it. It was like, yeah, come in and see, I puked up 4 days ago and it's still there, right? So they would all turn around and say, fine, okay, so they started coming in, feeding it beer, biscuits, salami, pastrami, and this thing's growing, okay, from a little pile of puke like this, it suddenly becomes this obelisk, hairy, smelly, and
okay.
Mutty turned around and said, I'm not cleaning it up. So George turned around and said, well, I'm not bloody well cleaning it up either. So it went on, got to the second week, and you can imagine what it was like by then. Right? We'd fed it everything you could think of. Pills, beer, that was it. The biggest A&R man in Germany at that time basically wanted to sign the Beatles up and Tony Sheridan. And, we signed the contract. We thought we were going to go into a studio. We ended up going into a school hall, the Albert Ecker. And we set up on stage. We were a little bit dismayed. So we set up on stage, and it was a portable studio, which he used, okay? And we played, and he turned around and said, okay, these are the numbers that I want you to play. My Bonnie, Cry for a Shadow, Ain't She Sweet? You most probably know them better than what I do, okay? And in view of the fact that we most probably played them nights after nights after nights after nights, okay, it was very much a case we set up in 1 or 2 takes, it happened, okay. So, you know, we played there. The funny thing was, on the first take, which was supposed to be the best one that was going to be, right, George kicked a bottle of Coke over, right, so in the middle of the take, this clattering happens, right, so that spoiled that take. So, okay, Mike Bonney had about 2 or 3 takes, but we wrapped the session up. It took us 2 days to do it. We thought we were going to be on royalties. We read the contract. No, we were session man for Tony, right? So we got paid, I think it was something like about 30 Deutschmark, which was about £10, right? Dollar-wise, $15 today, something like that. Yeah, give or take, okay. So we got paid, and we went out and got drunk. And that's the only royalties we've had from my body, okay?
Right, so you burn a condom with Paul, and you get deported.
Yes, go on. I can't deny that, go on.
Can't deny that.
What?
So you get back. Well, let me ask you this. Is it true, was there really a Raymond Jones that asked for a record called My Bonnie, or is that a fake story?
What do you think?
I've talked to someone who knows Raymond Jones and said he certainly did ask for it.
He did.
There is a Raymond Jones?
There is a Raymond Jones, yeah, you know.
Because Alistair Taylor put out a book, and he claimed that that story was completely false.
No.
True
I think,
story.
you know, Ray, if he's still alive, God bless him, you know, he was the actual guy who went into the NEMS and turned around and said, you know, have you got My Bonnie by the Beatles? And, you know, as we found out afterwards, it wasn't My Bonnie by the Beatles, it was Tony Sheridan and the Beat Brothers.
The Beat Brothers.
So that just adds to total confusion, okay, but that's the way it happened, you know.
So you're playing in the cavern, and it's a room of sweat. The walls are sweating. You weren't probably the most popular member of the band.
No.
Nah, come on now. You had that James Dean kind of look. The women loved you. I know you're being humble. They did love you.
Go on.
Yes, exactly. They did love you. You had a, you know, an idol look, a pop idol look to you. And a gentleman comes in by the name of Brian Epstein. He sees the band. He comes back to say hi in the dressing room. You were there in the dressing room. What was that like?
We didn't know him from Adam. We knew him from NEMS, because we used to go into NEMS and basically plague the shop assistants to play the records, all the new releases. So, of course, when we'd go into NEMS, there was mayhem, you know, because we were quite popular in Liverpool. So the word was out, the Beatles are going to NEMS. God, you know, we'd do a dinner time session, which meant that we played at the Cabin from 12 to 2. Then we'd go to the Grapes for a pint, which was a pub. And then we'd end up in NEMS. But by then the word was out. So by the time we got to NEMS, it was full of females, all screaming. And we stayed there for a couple of hours, you know. We never listened to the records. But we met Brian Epstein there, because he used to come down. Who the hell are these guys dressed in leathers, scruffy, stinky people, long hair, and
he's in a nice suit.
He's in a nice suit, okay. So he stood out, okay, and it was like, you know, what are these guys doing here? Because all the shop staff are all, you know, oh yeah, do you want to hear this one? Do you want to hear that one? And it was like, yeah, go on, we'll hear it. No, we don't like that. No, give that one to Jerry. No, we don't want to play that one. And he'd come down because there was mayhem going on. Okay, screams, you know, people like that. And, you know, as we later found out, you know, he was bewitched with us. He was so enthralled about these exciting young guys dressed in leathers. They were exciting him.
But he was excited about the music? What do you think?
Well, we think the music was secondary, okay? Knowing Brian's inclinations, okay? Maybe he was excited with the leathers and the long hair and the handsome guys.
Well,
But he signed us anyway, that's the main thing. And God bless him, you know, he did a fantastic job.
Now, when he signed you, where did he sign you? At the Casbah or at Whitechapel?
No. Initially, it took place above the Casbah, in the living room of Hayman's Green. Okay. He brought the contract there. He discussed it with Mona. Mona had basically turned around and said, you know, you're going to be the manager and do a good job. But he ran it through the fact that he basically was a little bit worried about the fact of taking the Beatles over. And you know, Mona had basically helped them as much as she could. So the fact when he was going to put pen to paper, you know, he came down and talked to her. And Mo turned around and said, no, you know, I've done as much as I can for them. You've got a nugget, you know, you've got a diamond. You just got to polish it, you know, so promise me that you will do that. And he turned around and said, I will. And my God, did he polish that diamond. Okay, it was incredible.
And that's why I talk so glowingly about Mona Best. She really was a visionary, and she kind of managed the band before Brian, and she entrusted the band in his hands. But Brian didn't sign the contract, right? The boys did, but he didn't.
Yeah, the dirty stop out. No. I mean, he had reservations, you know, because one of the things when he first approached us and turned around and said, I want to be manager, he said it's a two-way thing. You know, I will do my best. If it doesn't work, then I will drop you. And the same with us. He basically said, you know, it was very much a case of, okay, if it doesn't work with you, then you can drop me. So suppose we only found out afterwards he never signed a contract. That was his escape clause, okay. But much to my dismay, when I was dismissed, I found that I wasn't under contract. Okay, so, but that's another story.
That's interesting. Well, let me ask you, Paul's late for the signing, right? You remember that?
Yeah, he was always late.
And Brian was upset.
Yep.
George says he's taking a bath. George says he's taking a bath.
Yeah.
Brian's very upset. And George comes back with a very funny line. Do you remember the line?
Go on.
He's very clean. So Paul's late, and
he
Brian's
smells sweet. He smells sweet.
He smells sweet. And Brian's he's impeccable, on time. And Paul was late. So let's fast forward a little bit. Let's move over to the fact that Neil Aspinall, Mal Evans, they're your guys. They drive the van. You used to drive in that van for hours. One time there was no windshield, and you drove in the winter weather, true?
Yeah, I think I spent a third of my life in that van.
Really?
You know, so we went through summers, we went through winters, but it was an experience. It was rock and roll. That's what it was all about.
That's right.
So.
And then Brian, wanting to make you guys appeal to a mass audience, decides, okay, you shouldn't be wearing leather, no more greasy hair. He put you in suits.
Yeah.
And that day he brought you to a tailor or store, and you guys were like, oh my God, we're getting new clothes.
Yeah, there was a split division. George and Paul were quite happy to go into suits. John and me, being the rockers, we didn't want to go into suits. Okay, so we got dragged to Bean O'Dawn, and we ended up having these mohair suits. Okay, white shirts, black ties, winkle pickers, pointed shoes. And that was the new image that Brian wanted to have, okay? But John and I didn't like it, so we cut a deal with Brian. Okay, we turned around and said, if you want to put us into suits, okay, some of the shows we're going to play leathers, right? Some of the shows we're going to play suits, right? So as we changed into suits, right, and it became the norm for us to perform on stage, lo and behold, who's walking through the dance halls? Brian Epstein. But what's he got dressed in? Leathers. So, you know, he changed us into clean little people, and he became a rocker.
And the haircuts. Astrid, Klaus Vormann. So let's go back to Hamburg for a second. Klaus Vormann spots you guys and says, oh my God, I love this band. He's walking down the street and hears rock music coming out of a club. Goes in, and is he with Astrid, or is that later? And did Astrid create the haircut?
Yeah, I think she did. But the funny thing was, I mean, they were called X's at that time, I think, and they were student types. So her friends all had these haircuts, you know, which later went on to become, you know, Beatle mop tops or whatever the name was for it. So Klaus was enamored with us simply because of the fact we had this rock and roll image. You know, we were swept back hair, you know, sweaty black t-shirts, cowboy boots, and it was totally different from his life, from his existence. So he had actually seen us, and of course he brought Astrid down, and as the world knows now, okay, Astrid fell in love with Stu, Stu fell in love with Astrid, right? That was the biggest love story in rock and roll, most probably. You know, there was instant love at first sight. And it was one of those ones. She persuaded Stu to comb his hair down, right? That was the first wave of it, right? So Stu combs his hair down, gets it cut. The next thing is, he sees us, we all start laughing. You know, what the hell's that? Okay. You know, we've all still got our Tony Curtis's and our Elvis Presley's and our, you know. So we turned around and said, what have you done? Comb it back up again. So he combed it back up again, right? Astrid saw him the next night, combed it back down again, right? But cut the long story short, okay. A little while afterwards, we suddenly find George, okay, who's got a big quiff. And he walks in, hair down, cut. So he went through the same thing. You know, what the hell are you doing? You know, you look a bloody idiot, right? He kept it down, right? Many, many years afterwards, or a little bit afterwards, John and Paul went to Paris and they met a guy called Jürgen Vollmer, who was a friend of Astrid's, okay? And lo and behold, they came back. And what did they have? Haircuts, okay? So I never got asked.
That's right. See, a lot of people don't, I mean, there's a misconception that you refuse to do your hair, but no one asked you to change your hair.
No. I'll be quite honest, you know, I mean, 50 odd years afterwards, if they'd most probably asked me then, I don't know whether I would have done it, you know, but I think I would have done, okay, but that's, you know, that's something that the punters to worry about anyway, not me. So.
Now, Brian calls you in. Let's, you know, you're such a great guy because no one would have survived all this time under the circumstances that you survived. I mean, how do you live with that? And you've come to terms with it, and you have a great life now. You own the Casbah. You have your brother Rogue and grandchildren. And I don't really have a question, but I just want to say, you know, I commend you on, you know, being here today.
Well, thank you, but it's nice that I'm able to be here. Okay, so you know, I've led a hectic life. I've enjoyed it. I enjoy every day. And as Chachi turned around and said, it's one of these things. You know, I wake up. I'm thankful for what happened. Hopefully, you know, I'll meet the future. You know, take it day by day, and that's what it's all about. You know, life is for living. Let's live it. Okay.
Now, when Brian called you in and told you this, did he ask you to stay on to do a few more shows?
He did, yeah, that was the funny thing. when he kicked me out, he turned around and said, it's already been arranged that Ringo will join the band on Saturday. And I think this was a Wednesday. So there was a couple of gigs that they had to play, and he turned around and said, you know, will you play those gigs? And I turned around, because I was, okay, shell-shocked, didn't know what I was saying. I turned around and said, yeah, I'll do that. And then when I got back home again, the reality hit me. It was like, I can't go on stage with them. They've just kicked me out the band. How the hell can I sit behind the drum kit and smile and pretend that, you know, it's all hunky-dory? So Neil was the roadie at that time. You know, he turned around and said, are you going to do it, Pete? And I turned around and said, nope. So he went, and when he got to the ballroom that they were playing at, Brian turned around and said, where's Pete? And Neil turned around and said, where the hell do you expect him to be? You know, he said, he's back in the house. He doesn't want to play. You know, he can't play. Brian was a little bit upset. He turned around and said, well, Pete agreed to play. And Neil turned around and said, well, how the hell do you expect them to be? You know, how do you feel? How do you expect them to, you know, feel playing what it was? But the funny thing was, Brian must have had an idea that I was going to not turn up for those gigs. Because he had Johnny Hutch from the Big Three ready to step into my shoes. So Johnny played a couple of gigs with the Beatles from the Big Three until Ringo took over the band on Saturday.
Neil was a boarder in your home.
Yep.
And Neil offered to quit once you were let go. And you told him no, right?
Yeah, I mean, Neil and I were great mates. You know, we got to know one another from the Casbah. And he got involved. He was a fan of the band. And then, of course, okay, when we needed a roadie, he went out and got a van. You know, he bought a van. I think you could call it a van. It had 4 wheels and an engine, but that was about it. And it was very much a case of, you know, he loved doing what he was doing. Okay, he was training to be an accountant. He got bitten by the show business bug. Okay, accountancy went out the window, even though he was a very astute businessman, as the world knows now. You know, head of Apple. My God, who could be head of that corporation and not be an astute businessman? You know, he was a wise old owl. And, you know, because he got the van and because of what was happening, because he was so entrenched, when he turned around and said, you know, you've been kicked out, Pete, I'm going to leave. Because that was how close we were at that time. And it was, I turned around and said, Neil, right, they're going places, okay, stay with them. And I'm very happy to turn around and say that he did. And he went on to rule, and I turned around and say that, okay, and I picked my words very carefully, rule the Apple Corporation. He was the brains behind everything that was going on.
He was. He truly was. And I don't know, was that uncomfortable for him? You know, he's living at your home. The Beatles let you go, but yet they keep him. And then he, as you said, he eventually runs Apple. And does he give you that anthology? Was he the guy behind the anthology Kiss, meaning the 10 Pete Best songs on the record? I mean, was he the guy that did all that for you?
I think there's a lot of people most probably think because of the allegiance we had, and because of the friendship that we had when we were youngsters. You know, we were teenagers, we grew up, you know, we traveled together, we sat for hours in the van, we drank together, you know, it was one of those things. You know, we stayed at the house.
You guys remain lifelong friends.
Yeah, I mean, but what people forget, you know, and I think this is where it gets taken a little bit out of perspective. Okay, because of the allegiance we had, because of the friendship we had, it was like, okay, many years afterwards, okay, when did the anthology come out? 94, 95, something like that. Yeah, right. You know, I mean, that was nearly 30 odd years after I'd been kicked out the Beatles. And it was very much a case of, he did phone me, you know, he was part of the Apple, you know, first take, if you could put it that way. You know, he ran the rule over me, and he basically turned around and said, Pete, we may be interested in using some of your material. I said, fine, okay. After that, it went to the lawyers, okay. Neil became, he wasn't in the picture. It then became a legal battle, okay. I thought I was going to be on 1 or 2 tracks. As history portrays now, I ended up being on 10, which was great, okay. If Neil was involved in it and he was behind it, I thank you. If he wasn't, I still thank you. Okay.
And you reaped a reward for those 10 songs.
Yes, I've been...
Finally.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
It's a long wait.
Let's see, 30 odd years I managed to get some royalties out the Beatles. So,
yeah.
But
that was good to hear.
It's been good, you know. I've drunk a lot of tequila and a lot of scotch, and some mimosas on a, you know, Saturday morning.
Well, God bless you for that. You deserved it, I tell you. You deserved it.
I've got a hell of a thirst anyway, so...
Anybody have a question? Yes.
Oh, okay. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so your mom was from India. You were born in India. Later on, George kind of found, got his own Indian thing going on with the sitar and the Indian culture and all that. Do you think you guys missed out bonding over Indian culture, or is that just something that Did you ever think about it, or did you ever talk about it with him?
No, I think basically what happened, I mean, this is my own impression, okay. When George used to come to the Casbah, okay, Mona, like myself, was born out in India, you know, from English parentage. And she used to talk to George and to the rest of the guys. And she'd regale them with stories from India, you know, the fascination that she had for it. And I think somewhere in the, you know, the future, those memories stayed with George. And when the position came, he was being sort of influenced by Mona talking to him, you know, the mystique of the Eastern culture. And I think that's why George followed suit, you know.
You know, what was interesting, you know, obviously it's known that none of the Beatles communicated with you after that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But then John calls your mom, Mona, in 1967, and they're putting together the cover of Sgt. Pepper. I don't know if everybody realizes this, but John Lennon calls Mona Best and asks to borrow your grandfather's war medals for the album cover. People know that? Some do, some don't? Yeah, you heard it on my show, because I had Pete on the show a couple of weeks ago. So I bring it up again because it's really interesting that Pete would do that. I mean, that John would do that. As I said on the show, John calls Mona. Mona says yes. Mona doesn't even ask Pete to see if he would feel okay with that. Mona agrees. Well, you can take over the story.
Yeah, I mean, there was no reason for it to ask me. God bless us, you know, that it happened, you know, when I was talking around about 1967, whatever time Sgt. Pepper came out. And it was very much a case, there were her father's medals, okay? Nothing to do with me. He was my grandfather, but they were her father's medals. And, you know, John had remembered this, you know, because she talked about it when he was at the Casbah, you know, way back in 59, 60. So it was very much a case when Sgt. Pepper, he realized that Mo had these war medals, you know, and he approached Mo, and Mo turned around and said, yeah. You know, it's as simple as that. There was no need to bring me into the equation.
Wouldn't Mona say, you know, John, screw you. You know, you did this to my son, my flesh and blood.
No, you didn't know Mo. You didn't know Mona.
That's why she was special.
Yeah, that's why she was precious. She was, you know, as I turn around and say, the unsung hero. Okay, she did so many things which went unscripted. And that was one of them. I think it only became public knowledge many, many years afterwards that, yes, you know, her father's, you know, war medals were on Sgt. Pepper. You know, and people then turned around and said, you know, what a story that is. You know, but,
and he returned them.
That was the thing she did.
He sent them back. He said he returned them after he used them.
That was the condition, okay? I will lend you the medals, but make sure they come back, because they are precious to me. And they did. You know, that was the incredible thing about it.
True or false?
With a little bit of a bonus.
Yes.
Okay. He sent the present down.
True or false? Years later, John Lennon said, what did he say? I should have called Pete. I should have stuck up for Pete and kept him in the band. Did he say that?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, it's been scripted. Many people have turned around and said it. He's been well documented in interviews. And it was nice, you know. I mean, John and I were great mates, you know, during my time with the band. And, you know, it was nice to hear that out of all of them, John was the guy who was courageous enough to turn around and say, I should have helped Pete. I should have stayed, should have been part of it. You know, maybe the dismissal would never happen.
There you go.
My name is John. Pete's a pleasure. Chachi, you're awesome.
Thank you.
I guess a two-part thing, but I'd love to know your feelings on Backbeat if you got to see it, you know, when you're at Portrayal and that, or what you thought of those stories. And I guess the other quick one would be, we're talking about friendships or communicating with the Beatles afterwards. When Paul went back to play the Cavern was like 10 years ago, when he did the show at the Cavern. Did you have a relationship or any interaction with that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Backbeat. The press and the publicity, as I've always turned around and said, you know, they said it was the Beatles in Hamburg. As we all know now, it was Stu, Sutcliffe and Astrid's love story. Okay, we just happened to be figures in the background, but it was sold, it was the Beatles in Hamburg. As regards my portrayal in there, you know, I don't think I had two words to say. You know, so that sums up what they most probably thought of my, you know, what the directors thought of it. But yes, it was like everything else. They'd taken public license, they'd taken artistic license with it. I could look at it and turn around and say, no, that never happened, this was wrong, that's wrong, this, that, and the other. Right? So it was entertainment, okay? It was a good film.
Right.
The thing which was great about it, which I've always said and I always will, the backing tracks and the soundtrack to it was absolutely brilliant. Okay, it captured the savageness and the rawness of what we were about in those days. So that was a great thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Savage young Beatles.
Like Munchkins here.
Yes. Your name?
Derek is out.
Derek, hey, good Derek.
Derek, incidentally, we were at the Bee Gees show the other night. Barry Gibb, you know the Bee Gees. Barry Gibb played the Boston Garden. He dedicated a song to me and my beautiful bride Stephanie, who's down the back, in front of thousands of people. And Derek sent me the audio of the. So thank you, Derek. But you have a question?
I actually had a comment about the medals. I've been to the Casbah a couple times, and last time I was there, Rory brought them down and had them in an envelope. Actually, let us hold them, which I thought was fantastic.
You know, it proves, it validates it. You know, it's not something which is being, you know, portrayed or taken out of context. You know, there's the actual medals. You can see them for yourself.
I have to say, if you go to Liverpool, that is the place to go. It's better than the Cavern. It's the best place in Liverpool.
I will endorse that.
Yeah.
I will
Right.
endorse that.
There you go.
Yo, 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 yo.
And I don't think it's the real cavern anymore, right? Is it the rebuilt cavern? It's next door, so it's not even the original cavern.
After the Beatles, when you recorded, there was only 2 songs you ever actually sang on. Boys in Kansas City. I have the 45 actually, surprisingly, which is pretty great.
Yeah, okay.
The question I have is, or actually almost like a request from fans, is when you were with the Beatles, you used to come out in the front and sing a couple songs, like Wild in the Country and Pinwheel Twist, I think you mentioned.
Peppermint twist.
Peppermint, yes, peppermint twist.
Will you ever do that for us on a recording so we can actually hear what that would have been like?
I don't know. Stranger things happen. You know, maybe it's a little bit like What's This Spot? I've got a great band, and you know, they might turn around and say, "Oh, for God's sake, Pete, you're not singing," right?
I think historically, I think it would be fantastic, and I think everybody would probably purchase it and be interested in it.
Well, that's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
you know, so
That was kind of my question.
you know, that makes about six copies we've sold. So you know,
Thank you, Derek.
Being in the throne here, when I come up here, almost felt like I was going to be knighted.
okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Derek.
You've really done us such a favor telling us about how the legend grew, you know, the big picture of what it was all like. If you can look back, what are some of the little everyday details that we've forgotten? You know, you're going about Liverpool in those days. What are the little details of everyday life that if we realized what it was like, it would seem so different from what we're doing now? That would put it all in context.
You know, we started off as a humble rock and roll band in Liverpool. And when we came back to Liverpool, okay, if I go to Germany first, okay, Hamburg. We used to end up, the first trip out there, we found a cafe which was Harold's Cafe, which was on the Grosse Freiheit, okay, and we used to end up there. We ended up wrecking the place, you know, but we ended up there. That was our eating place. And then we went from there because we wanted to have Kellogg's cornflakes, okay. We were Liverpool lads, we were English, we wanted cornflakes, right? So we found the Seamen's Mission, and it was run by an English guy. And we turned around and went there. We found it by chance. It was down on the waterfront. And we turned around and said, "Can you get us cornflakes?" And he said, "I'll get you cornflakes." So every breakfast then was at the Seamen's Mission. Okay, cornflakes, steak and eggs. That was it. That was our staple diet, okay? Apart from when we finished playing and then it was beer, okay? Which was normal anyway.
Pete, I just wanted to ask. I have a documentary at home called Best of the Beatles.
Yup.
And I would have to say that it was your mother that gave you fellas your first exposures. Do you honestly think that it would have gone the way it did if it hadn't been for your mother? I mean, the Casbah was before the Cavern.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think it would have, I mean, fate has a funny way of doing things. Do you think maybe things would have been a little different if it hadn't been for your mother? Or
To be totally honest, if it wasn't for the Casbah, and if it wasn't for Mona, and the fact that the Quarrymen, okay, John, George, Paul, whatever lineup it was, reformed again, maybe the Beatles never would have happened.
Probably not. I
You
would
know,
have to agree with
so
that.
you know that's a totally different story. You know, it's like one of those things. If it wasn't for the Casbah, and I think that's why we're so proud of it. You know, and I
Something to
keep
be
turning
proud
around
of.
and saying the unsung hero. You know, my mother Mona. But if it wasn't for the Casbah, if it wasn't for Mo, maybe this phenomena, you know, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here today. It's as simple as that. You know.
Well, you were the first ones to give them their beat, you know, even before Ringo. I mean, I'm not discrediting Ringo. He was a great drummer, and they're a great band. And forgive the shirt. This is one with Ringo on it. I don't have it.
I'll forgive you. I'll forgive you.
I need to find a shirt like this young lady has down here.
That
You want it.
or John in the back look wearing a Heyman's Green t-shirt, which is a fantastic record, Pete Best Band t-shirt. Exactly. And incidentally, the Love Me Do version on Anthology was simply the first version you recorded. I mean, you know, and some people might disparage the way you played on that record, but certainly that was only that was the first session for it, right? The first copy of it.
Yeah, I mean, people compare my version with, you know, Ringo's or Andy White's, whatever the, you know.
And Ringo didn't
the
even get to
might be.
play it himself.
Not initially, no. But, you know, I think what people have to remember, and most probably a lot of people don't know, that that wasn't a finished product. You know, we put it down, it was supposed to be listened to, we're going to put the finishing touches to it. But of course, as history portrays now, I never got back to finish it.
Yeah, but
And
you
I
know,
think that's why they changed it.
and you know, I've played early versions of A Hard Day's Night and other early versions, and you hear George trying to work out the guitar parts, and that was the same situation with Love Me Do that Pete was on.
We met you when you were at the Firefly.
The Firefly restaurant in Marlboro, the barbecue joint that my friend owns.
And I met you then. That was
I was playing with the band there.
Yep, you had your band.
That's right.
We went to see you.
was
But
great.
That was a fun time. But my question is on the Beatles. You said that everybody knew the words to the songs that you were playing, and that it was pretty boisterous and loud and altogether inclusive. So I was wondering what songs would everybody know? I mean, you weren't writing music at that point,
No.
then, right? So whose songs were they? What music was it that everybody knew in English that was now the Beatles group was playing? Who was that?
Most of the American standards, you know, it was as simple as that, you know, because they were the ones that were on the jukebox, you know, people were singing to them, they heard them on the radio. So even though they couldn't converse in English,
They knew this.
they knew the lyrics, they knew the dialogue. So when we used to basically turn around and say, okay, you know, Ray Charles, what did I say? They knew the words. Okay, Chuck Berry's Sweet Little 16, Johnny Be Good, they knew the words. And that was why, you know, when we got raucous choruses and we got them to join in, they join in. You know, it was
Did you
simple
do
as that.
Elvis at all?
We did Elvis, yeah. We did, you know, Love Me Tender, and, you know, Don't Be Cruel. There was a lot of them, you know. Because it was like everything else, you know, he was one of the greats.
Yeah,
We did some of his songs.
yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you.
When the Beatles did the Australian tour and Ringo had appendicitis or something, how come they didn't ask you to be the drummer?
I don't know.
Would you have said yes, or would you have said no?
Most probably no.
Really? Are you-
Yeah, yeah, I think so. You know, I think the fact that they never asked me speaks volumes. Okay, you know, they wanted Jimmy Nichols. They brought Jimmy Nichols in, even though they left him, you know, sitting in an airport all by himself. You know, that was it. You know, so that was the end of his Beatle days. So most probably when I look at that, you know,
Yeah.
if I'd have been treated the same, it would have been like a double dose of
You know
arsenic.
how much he got for doing that tour?
I have no idea.
No
No
idea.
idea.
Probably ain't much, right?
I don't know. That's Jimmy, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean. Well, thank you.
Okay.
How many years ago did McCartney play here? 6, 7 years ago?
At Fenway Park?
No, wait, on the Garden.
Or the Boston Garden?
Yeah.
Gee, I can't remember.
Well, a buddy of mine was setting up. The teams just have to take the equipment off the truck. They have to take the equipment off the truck. All the teams, as we're told, and they bring it to the stage, and on the road he set up the stuff. They were told not to talk to Paul McCartney or look him in the eyes when he's walking in. So a buddy of mine turns around, here comes McCartney, walks right up to him, says, "Hey Paul, how you doing?" And Paul looked at him, he almost choked. He couldn't believe someone actually walked up to him and said, "Hey, how you doing?" You know? I had a funny story that I was wondering, did you have a big ego like that back in the day, or did it develop over the years, or everybody grooming them, you know?
No, we were thankful that people came up and said hello to us. You
know.
Yes,
How about Ringo recently?
Oh, don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't talk about Ringo here.
Sign autographs, they're going to be thrown out in the trash.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Ringo was like everyone else.
Yeah,
I mean, in those days, let's be quite honest about it. Okay, we were young teenagers, right? The fact that fans clamoured over us, we loved it.
It was a
This
thrill.
is what rock and roll was all about.
Right.
Okay, so the more girls, the more fellas that came up and hugged us, kissed us, not the fellas.
Yeah.
You know, we enjoyed it. That was rock and roll. This is what it's all about, guys. Let's go. You know. So
Pete, after that was done to you by Brian, there were riots when the Beatles played the Cavern, and George Harrison absorbed a black eye because of you. I thought that was great. Not a question, just a comment.
no, I never punched him. No,
no, a girl might. I think a girl punched him.
No, I know the guy did. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. Out of all, I know the Beatles are considered the greatest band of all time. I was wondering, if you had to pick one Beatles song that you consider truly dearest to you, which one would you pick and why?
Yes.
So standing there, you know that.
And why that?
Why? Okay, because that was the cusp of rock and roll. Okay, that to me is the Beatles before they went on to become, you know, all the other stuff. You know, the different tracks that they went on. Rock and roll, that was simplicity. It was a simple track. It's very catchy. It's got a great beat behind it. That's why I love it.
And one more question. Which band do you love to enjoy playing with the most out of all the bands you've worked with? And why?
Which band do I enjoy playing?
I would like to answer that. The Pete Best Band.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why do you like working with them? Is there a relationship with them, or do you have
That's his band.
something close?
That's his band. This is the album. I tell you, 2008, this record came out, and I was just blown away by it. And Pete will comment on it now because we only have a couple minutes left. But this record, if you don't have it, find it. I don't know if you're selling copies here or not, Pete, but I know you can get them out there. Heyman's Green is such a great record. My favorite song, Broken. When I'm down, surround me, that surrounds me.
That's a good version, doesn't it?
Thank you. That's the hook, right, Pete?
That's the hook.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I hope that we answered some of your questions.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. So when you were playing with the Beatles starting off, did you have a feeling they were going to become as big as they did, or did you think it was something that was going to die off eventually?
After conquering Germany and coming back to Liverpool, I think we knew that we'd get a record in the charts, we'd be a big band in Liverpool, you know, in England. No one in their wildest dreams would have ever thought they were going to become the icons of the music industry, you know, and so legendary that, you know, nearly 50 odd years afterwards, people are still discovering them, people are still enthralled with them, you know, so it was lovely to be part of that, you know, from its infancy.
I wanted to ask, you were in the movie The Rocker, which was kind of the comedic take on your career.
Okay.
Well, two-part. What was it like doing that movie, and any more acting in the future?
Well, let's put it this way, okay? When he turns around and says, you were in the movie, right? It makes it look as though I'm playing, you know, the main role. I was sitting in a bus stop, okay? And I looked at some guy and went, okay. That was my acting career, okay? So, you know, whether people pick up on that afterwards, who knows, you know? I mean, I'm open to offers. So maybe I'll sit in anyone's bus stop.
Thank you, Eric. And you know, the thing about Heyman's Green I thought was interesting, and I thought it was a brilliant cover, Pete. I don't know if this was your idea, but if you see the anthology cover as a picture of the Beatles with Pete's picture torn out, and here's the torn out part that was put on Heyman's Green. True? That's true. Your idea, Pete, or someone else close to you?
Believe it or not, the band, Paul and Rogue, came up with this idea, and they put it past me, and I turned around and said, it's brilliant, okay, because, you know, Heyman's Green, it was lovely to be part of. It's my life in music, you know, if I could put it that way. But when they actually turned around and said, it's your answer to their anthology, okay, and they turned around and said, you got your face ripped off on the anthology, okay, everyone knows it, you know, there's Pete, but part of the Beatles, but he's got no head. Right? And that piece is missing. And the piece that is missing is on that.
Right there.
So that was my way of getting back, and the band's way of getting back and going.
Exactly. Okay, one more hand, yes.
Do you think that if they ever made a movie on your life, Pete, my wife agrees that in that picture there, I think an actor that could play you would probably be Johnny Depp.
True. I think it'd be great.
I think you look just like him in that picture. No, I just wanted your opinion on that.
As long as it don't end up looking like the Lone Ranger.
Yeah. Or that pirate guy.
Caribbean for that matter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, okay, sure.
And when you enter the Casbah, there's 4 leathers hanging there. Are those really the Beatles' jackets?
One of them is.
Yours?
There you go. You know, everybody says, oh, who's the 5th Beatle? You know, there's no debating. You are a Beatle. You'll always be a Beatle. You're a great man. You're loved by so many people all over the world. And we're just so happy that you're still here with us, because, you know, that inner circle, yeah, that inner circle just slowly is depleting. And quickly, when Brian Epstein, is it Epstein? For sure. Tell me which one.
Oh, I call him Epi.
Okay, Epi. When he passed away, what were your thoughts at the time? He was 32.
Young man, again another tragedy, which is the Beatles, at a very early stage. He was a maestro. A lot of people turned around and said, you know, he lost the Beatles millions, but my God, he made them millions as well. And, you know, whatever it may have been, whether it was suicide, whether it was a drug overdose, whether it was a unforeseen conclusion, you know, he did something wrong. There was a guy who was involved very much with the biggest band in show business. It was probably in the world today, right? Whose life was tragically taken away, okay? And I always turn around and say, the Beatles, okay, 2 people which are very influential with the Beatles, my mother Mona and Brian Epstein. And if it hadn't been for them, maybe there never would have been a Beatles.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
God bless Mona Best for giving us Pete. And ladies and gentlemen, you can meet, say hi to Pete downstairs. He's signing autographs.
We'll do something for him. Okay. It's a little habit we have in Liverpool, right? So what I'd like you to do, stand up, okay? Put your hands out. Wave them in the air and repeat after me. Num 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 num. Thank you.
What do you think of Pete Best's lecture?
It's great, and he always has interesting things to say. He's an interesting guy, loaded with stories, and fun person. I've loved being around Pete. Yeah, well, I think Pete's had a happy life. He's with the same wife all these years, the only Beatle it is. He's got great children and grandchildren, and he's had a good life, and he's done well financially. So he's all set. He's a happy man, and that's my impression.
Yeah, and you played drums with him.
I played drums with Pete, 3 different times live in New York City one time. That was great. And fun. Yeah, very honored to do that. He gave me some moments in front of my family, friends, and it was great. Just how many people can say they played with the Beatles? It's a great thing.
All right, John and Colleen Van Horn, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I'm with Chachi from Breakfast with the Beatles.
That's right.
You just had a lecture with Pete Best. I mean, that was phenomenal to hear those questions answered.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the more I hear about Pete Best, the more I respect him, really.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't really know that much about him before, but he's an amazing man.
He is an amazing man, and he's much beloved, and sometimes I don't think he understands how much people love him, but despite the fact he was dumped by the Beatles, he still holds a place in history and a place in Beatle fans' hearts. I mean, that's part of the Beatles story. So, and of course his mom, you know, she's a big reason why the Beatles became who they were. She started managing them, and then she was smart enough to say, you know, this is getting bigger than me, and she handed over the boys to Brian Epstein, and just brilliant visionary woman.
Your show is on what time?
I have Breakfast with the Beatles. I've been hosting the show for so many years, 20 plus years in Boston. Breakfast with the Beatles on WZLX 100.7, Sunday mornings at 8. And we love the Beatles, and that's an hour where we play all kinds of Beatles collectively and solo artists as well, Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And I even play Pete Best, and I love his album, Hayman's Green. Specifically, my favorite track is Broken, but this album is so good, and I take such a thrill, such a pleasure, an honor, a privilege that I can sit in that studio and play music for all Beatle fans. So it's really it's a special thing for me. This is Chachi, host of Breakfast with the Beatles on WZLX, and this is Visual Radio.
And then you go take a meet.